What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are back with the conclusion of Absolute Power. It is important to specify this takes place before the DC all-in-one shot that we covered, and actually segues directly into it. But what this does is this picks up with Green Lantern. Now, this is still just before the finale to Absolute Power, specifically it's Green Lantern 15. And what this does is it picks up on a lot of the information and things that the superhero rebels, if we want to call them that, are trying to attain. Because remember, at this point in the story, Amanda Waller has imprisoned pretty much all the superheroes that exist on Earth. The power of those superheroes has been taken away and given to the Amazo robots, who are the ones rounding up all the superheroes in the Task Force 7 comic, the tie-in to all of this. And so really, it's kind of like a last-ditch effort here. Now, as part of this plan put together by Nightwing, what happens is that Wally West, who's one of the depowered superheroes riding the most amazing motorcycle I've ever seen, along with Hal Jordan, whose Green Lantern ring is depowered, they end up on one of Batman's islands. And what happens is that Hal Jordan basically introduces us to something called the Batwolf, which looks amazing. Like, this Batwolf looks so dope. I really hope we end up seeing more of it in like DC Comics. But what he says is the reason why we haven't seen it up to this point is because it was a prototype, that in reality, whenever it achieves any measure of speed that matters, truthfully, like, it blows up. So ultimately, Batman just kind of decommissioned it and essentially abandoned the island. But because of the situation that they're in, they're grabbing it because it's one of the few bits of Batman technology that exists out there that either Amanda Waller doesn't know about or Amanda Waller doesn't think is important enough to capture. And so this leads to Green Lantern, or really Hal Jordan, grabbing this thing while Wally West follows after him. Now from there, it transitions over to Coast City. And you initially pick up with Dove. Now Dove is not an overly important hero within this story, and really even within DC Comics as a whole, if I'm being honest. I know for like the 3 or 4 fans of Dove who are out there, you guys would disagree, but there's a reason why there's only 3 or 4 of you. But what you get here is her, and really kind of us as the audience, realizing she's one of the few people who doesn't really seem to understand everything that's going on, which really kind of tells us how clueless this girl is, right? Like, superheroes around the world have been captured by Amanda Waller, and she's like, I don't know where anybody else is. This is weird. Where are the superheroes at? Well, I don't know, Dove. Try turning on a TV. But what ends up happening is, like, Carol Ferris shows up here. Now, I may have said Carol Danvers earlier, but Carol Ferris shows up here. And Carol Ferris, for those of you guys who are experienced in the Lantern mythos, know she's the Star Sapphire. And while we don't necessarily have to go super in-depth into this, the Star Sapphire is one of a number of Lantern cores that exist out there, right? It's not just the Green Lanterns. For those of you guys who are unfamiliar with DC, you also have the Indigo Tribe, the Blue Lanterns, Sinestro Corps, the Red Lanterns of Rage, which are amazing, right? Like, they're so dope. But the Star Sapphires are the Lanterns of Love. And so with Carol showing up here and having her Star Sapphire ring, she kind of helps where she can, but then of course she ends up grabbing Dove and they start leaving, and then Dove basically just kind of starts crying, right? That what ends up happening is Carol Ferris tells her, I figure I can take you back to my friends. They're hiding out in the Tower of Fate, right? Where all the other superheroes are. It's outside the reach of Amanda Waller at this point. And in turn, like, Dove kind of starts crying, right? Sort of starts going nuts. So she's like, no, I'm not okay. None of us are. Hawk and the Lords of Order and Chaos are quiet. It's useless. It's all so useless. She kind of just starts giving in to this really sad, dark part of herself and starts crying. And then she starts speaking in a voice that's kind of not her own, where she says, I should have ended it when I had the chance. Now you have to do it. You have to kill me, right? And where she's just kind of babbling on, Carol's just like, what in the world are you talking about? And that's when a voice comes out of nowhere and it says, she has discovered the truth, that nothing matters, everything is meaningless, and the world is draped in sorrow, because this is the Sorrow Lantern, right? Nate, now if we're being honest with ourselves, the Sorrow Lantern is like one of those black pill guys or the incel guys. You'll see what I'm talking about as we get further through this, because it's hilarious. Like, it's not supposed to be, but it's hilarious because this guy is a dipshit. So what ends up happening is Hal Jordan literally grabs like the Batwolf, right? Switching back to Washington, DC. This guy takes this thing and is trying to figure out how to like pilot it or dock it or whatever it is that he needs to do. But ultimately he can't like fire any meaningful weapons or anything. And so he's just like, activate the Batmobile release. And so they activate this thing. The Batmobile comes flying out and crashes into the front of the Hall of Justice. It's dope. Like, I absolutely love this. And then because of the fact that the whole inside of the building is basically being controlled by robots, right, created by a combination of Failsafe and the wife, or I guess the queen of Brainiac, essentially Amanda Waller's henchman, that like Green Lantern basically activates an EMP cannon that just starts firing in every direction and taking all these robots out. Now, while that goes on, you end up finding out that the mission of Wally West was to get in here, take one of Mr. Terrific's T-spheres, attach it to the computer system so they could download all the data that's in the computer systems. Now, this is important for a couple different reasons. One, it's important because of the fact that it would give the Justice League access to information they had previously lost. Because remember, the attack of Amanda Waller came out of nowhere, right? It was the equivalent of a meteor strike in the middle of the night. You grab what you can, you get out of the house, and you flee. And so with the superheroes not really being able to gather all the information they needed, this is incredibly important. The other thing it does is that it kind of gives the situation where a way out is a way in, which is to say, if Amanda Waller has accessed their information, they can use Amanda Waller's access to access her information. So it can kind of give them a bit of a technological backdoor. Now, whether or not they're able to pull that off, we'll see over the course of the comic, but knowing Mr. Terrific being one of the smartest men in the world, he could definitely do it. The problem is that in the middle of all this, they're met by the arrival of Major Force. Now, here's the thing. Those of you guys who don't know about Major Force, I love this guy. And for all the wrong reasons. Major Force this guy is amazing. Sidetrack from the story for a second. For those of you guys who don't know about Major Force, Major Force became as notable as he did in DC Comics because when Kyle Rayner was the Green Lantern back in the 1990s, his girlfriend went missing. He eventually gets back to his apartment and finds out she'd been killed and stuffed inside his refrigerator. And Major Force was the one who did it. Like, it was crazy, right? This dude was nuts. And so Major Force is a legitimate psychopath. And much like Captain Atom, because the two of them are basically two sides of the same coin, that Major Force can manipulate infinite amounts of energy. What does that mean? It means Hal Jordan and Wally West better get the hell out of here or they're gonna die, right? There's just like, that's it. There's no way around this. And so following that, you switch over to the island nation of Gamorra. Now remember, Gamorra is the supermax prison where all the prisoners of Amanda Waller are being held. Alan Scott, the Green Lantern, is here. Now for the most part, Alan Scott is a character who hasn't really had a significant role in this story. In fact, he was captured fairly early on in the comic. But the significance of Alan Scott is that he was a member of the Justice Society of America. He still is. They were essentially the Justice League before the Justice League ever existed, right? In fact, they inspired the members of the Justice League to become superheroes in the first place. So he basically has like old man wisdom, is really what I'm saying here, right? And one of the Amazo robots named Jade Stone had essentially become his guard, right, in the prisoner he was in. But Alan Scott, right, ever the old wise man, right? This guy was basically like Uncle Iroh from Avatar: The Last Airbender, had just kind of like been having these discussions with Jade Stone, and was just sort of like, it's time to look inside you and begin asking the real questions, right? Like, who's the bad guy here? Us the superheroes that try to help people, or Amanda Waller who's trying to lock us away? And I don't even ask that or make that as a kind of a joke. That's really what he was asking the Amazo to comprehend, because the Amazo itself is basically just a robot, right? It has programming. But one of the things that had been established over the course of this is that the Amazo robots, in absorbing the powers of superheroes, had quite literally begun to absorb their morality, which began to conflict with the programming that they had. And so this is one of those instances where DC is introducing a new character that will likely go on to become a regular member of the DC landscape. And he'll go by the name Jade Stone, right? It's one of these things you can kind of see coming from a mile away. But switching back over to Nathan, right? Sorrow Lantern. I told you guys he was one of these incel, MGTOW, black pill type guys. One of the things to remember is that Carol Ferris had like left him in order to go back to Hal Jordan. And while the guy does have a legitimate beef, this is why I say, man, this dude is a punk. Because what happens is she's just like, Nate, you can't keep doing this. Like, you have to stop. And he says, Nate, no, he is gone. He was weak. Only sorrow remains, right? The whole of Reddit and Twitter will understand my pain, right? So like he attacks her, right? And then he's like, now feel what you have done. Feel the pain of loss, of sadness. And where she kind of comments to herself that like the feeling of sadness is overwhelming, he's like, yes, it was this sadness that changed me. When you went back to him, went back to the man that leaves, after everything he's done, after all the heartbreak, all the tears, and you still went back to him, why? Right? Carol Ferris in turn channels the power of the star sapphire, right? The power of love, and just says, because I love him, right? And that's where Nate's like, I can't stop. I need to let the world know why the only reality is the sadness it holds. That's what I must do, what I must share. I must go on the internet and talk about how girls are bad. And he's just like, I'll never love again. And after I'm done, you won't either. I told you. This dude is pathetic. So ultimately, he just like takes off, right? I mean, just to kind of give you guys like broad strokes, right? Let's scale out and look at the bigger picture here. He was in love with a girl. The girl bailed on him and went back to her ex-boyfriend. And now all girls are bad. Like that's literally what he's saying, right? Like, okay, I mean, I guess, even though you've never met them all, sure, right? I guess, go for it, home slice. We'll see how far that gets you in life. But then you switch back over to Hal Jordan and the Flash, right? Like Wally West. And while they're essentially making their escape, Major Force catches up to them. And it's important to understand, man, if he gets his hands on them, they are going to die. And that's almost exactly what happens, right? Like Hal Jordan is fleeing for his life, and Major Force is like, the queen demands your death. And in turn, when he goes to land this punch, Jade Stone jumps in, because Jade Stone had been alerted to the actions of Hal Jordan and was sent on the mission to basically capture Hal Jordan and to bring him back in, because Hal Jordan had previously been captured, right? He escapes. Hal Jordan uses the moment to basically activate his escape, right? Essentially jettisons out of the jet and then goes crashing down to the ground. He almost dies, and then Jade Stone catches him, and a Green Lantern central power battery seemingly appears on Earth. Now, here's the thing. I don't know how this got here, because I went to the Green Lantern comics. Unless I missed something, there's no indication that it's ever been here the entire time. You'd think it would, right? If Hal Jordan was like, oh man, there's a central power battery over there. Well, I'll just wait a while before I go over there. No, you'd think he'd go over there immediately. So I'm not 100% sure where this came from. If I missed something, someone in the comments section let me know. I mean, you will regardless, right? You guys love correcting me, but like, let me know if I missed something, right? But of course, Hal Jordan uses the central power battery to essentially recharge his ring. Now, because Jade Stone is essentially powered by Alan Scott's former Green Lantern powers, and he is in and of itself powered by willpower, basically Jade Stone will likely end up becoming a part of the Green Lantern mythos. But of course, this coincides with the arrival of Carol Ferris, who's basically here to help Hal Jordan. The two of them end up leaving while Jade Stone just kind of hangs out at the central power battery, and that takes us into Absolute Power number 4. Now, with this being the conclusion to Absolute Power, this comic is every bit as awesome as you think it is, because the first thing that happens is that all the heroes come together basically in the Supermax prison, but effectively in the Tower of Fate. And what they end up doing is having this sort of conversation on what it is that they do next. But of course, they also sort of establish where we are in the here and now, in the sense that all the superheroes have been freed, and that all the villains that they can get their hands on are basically being put back into security again, right? Wonder Woman says at least half of those rescued are too wounded to follow us, and we have 2 targets to hit. From Waller's Gamorrean base, Batman thinks he can neutralize the Amazos, yet we still don't even know its exact location. And that's where Hal Jordan and Wally West show up and say, actually not true, right? That was the information we were sent to gather, was the location of Amanda Waller's prison in Gamorra. Of course, Hal Jordan also celebrates the fact that he got his ring back, so that's awesome. But the other part of this is that something was being built in the basement of Amanda Waller's Supermax prison on Gamorra. Now, one of the things to remember is the Flash Barry Allen is there, but Barry's dealing with what's going on over there, so he doesn't have time to leave and to come back, tell them what's going on, and then go back to the basement. So they don't know what Barry knows. Now, of course, all this is going to come to a head, so yeah, like they'll find out quick, fast, and in a hurry, and so will we, because the multiversal army is dope. Like, it's so cool. And so that's where Nightwing, who again is still the one kind of leading the charge here, says, all right, guys, listen up. Amanda Waller's not the only one who trades in shock and awe. Tonight, we take back what is ours, not for us, but for a world that depends on us. I will not lie, the odds are not in our favor, and we may not survive, but there is no other path. And that's where he says, Batman, it's time to bring the thunder. And so they basically launch their full-on attack using the mother box to open a boom tube to Amanda Waller's Gamorrean prison. And all these superheroes immediately go against her. Now, under any normal circumstance, this would not be a fight at all, right? Like the entire superhero community, or at least those who were able-bodied and capable of fighting, going against basically some high-tech military guys? No, like it's no contest at all. But because of the fact that all these superheroes are for the most part either severely weakened or completely powerless, it really evens the playing field. And it's dope because what happens is Amanda Waller's forces go to fire off their guns and their guns backfire because they've been sabotaged. And that's when Amanda Waller realizes Green Arrow, who's been by her side the whole time, and the guy who orchestrated the initial attack on the superheroes was the one who turned against her. Now, we all saw that coming from a million miles away, but the question was, how was it going to happen? And we actually get an answer to that here in a little while, and it's pretty ingenious in terms of how this goes on. But then you switch to the Supermax sub-basement, right? Amanda Waller's multiversal gate. Now, this was kind of her backup plan because the idea was she would use her forces in order to take out pretty much all the superheroes. But if that failed, she would unleash an army from across the multiverse onto Earth. Now, truth to tell, this is probably Amanda Waller overplaying her hand in the same way that she overplayed her hand in having like a mother box hiding out on another planet, failing to realize that like Darkseid will hone in on it and Darkseid will find it, which he did. And Batman and Catwoman escaped just in time to keep Darkseid from invading the DC universe. So I'll tell you guys right now, if that hadn't happened, if like in the Batman tie-in, Batman and Catwoman had failed and Darkseid had killed them and made it into the main DC universe, like on Earth, it would have been game over. Everybody would have died. It would have been nuts. But the cool thing here is we get a couple of cool versions of the Flash and one of the greatest versions of the Flash. The first one we get is Baroness, right, from Earth 10. Then you also get Thunderjolt from Earth 13. But then you get Johnny Quick from Earth 3. Now, Earth 13 is pretty straightforward. Some of you guys may remember it. Some of you guys may not. Earth 13 was basically the reality where demons and monsters essentially ran everything, right? It was really more of a universe of magic than anything else. So you basically had Etrigan, who was kind of like that universe's version of Superman, so on and so forth. So that's why Thunderjolt looks like a kind of twisted version of Bane that has the Flash's powers. The other universe, Earth 10, the reason why this version of the Flash is called Blitzkrieg is because this is a universe where the Germans won World War II. And then of course, Johnny Quick in Earth 3. Earth 3 is the crime syndicate, right? Everybody who knows about DC Comics knows about this, but for those of you guys who don't, Earth 3 is kind of the opposite of the main DC universe. So all the heroes are bad guys and all the bad guys are good guys. It's just the natural state of that. It's a really, really cool set of events. But focusing on track here, one of the things that happens is that they all kind of start splitting up into groups in a variety of different ways that by and large, a lot of the superheroes out there that are just kind of dealing with the foot soldiers of Amanda Waller, right? The rank and file soldiers, they're really more of a distraction than anything else that allows guys like Hal Jordan to basically infiltrate into the room where Barry Allen is, that allow Nightwing and Superboy John Kent to like break through and go directly to Amanda Waller. And so that's why when you switch over to Barry, who's trying to find a way to close this multiversal portal, all these guys are forcing themselves through. Now, one of these guys looks like Owlman, right, from Earth 3, who's that reality's version of Batman. Owlman is amazing. Like, Owlman and Ultraman are incredible. I love those guys from DC Comics, and a lot of fans do, right? I wish DC would do more with Earth 3. I don't even know if they ever did like an Earth 3 line of comics, right? That would be amazing. But what this does is it leads to Hal Jordan showing up and trying to help Barry Allen. Now, the problem with this is while he is able to use his Green Lantern ring to create a kind of wall construct to keep the multiversal wall closed, he cannot do it forever. And while this does seem small, it's actually massive. Having enough willpower to close off a section of the multiverse, that's no small thing, right? There's a massive amount of energy that's trying to pour in. The other part of this is that you have Nightwing and Jonathan who do finally get to Amanda Waller, but Amanda's pissed, right? And here's the cool thing. I have never loved Amanda Waller's character more than I've loved her in this story because they show up on the scene as kind of like the way superheroes normally do. Like, haha, you know, we're here, Amanda Waller. Your day is done, you know, like that sort of thing. And she's just like, do you honestly think that we were not anticipating the Kryptonian now that Brainiac Queen no longer has control of him? She's like, what is this, amateur hour? And she like breaks out a piece of green kryptonite. And she's like, I've been playing relatively nice with you metahumans, no more, right? Today, we turn the page on superheroes once and for all and put you out of our misery. And it's just like Amanda Waller at her most ruthless. Now don't worry, man, she gets what's coming to her and it's fantastic. But the other thing you do is you switch over to Batman alongside the Blue Beetle Ted Kord and John Starr. Now, John Starr is really the star of the show here, no pun intended, and he's the guy that Batman was really after. The reason why is just an incredibly unique way of using his time travel capabilities, because John Starr, as the Time Commander, has an hourglass, and by way of the hourglass, he's able to manipulate time, travel back and forth through time, different things like that. Now, I'm not gonna lie, it was my initial thought that when Joshua Williamson and these guys invoked like the hourglass of Time Commander, they were just gonna be like, okay, so like they're just gonna go back in time and undo all this, which would have been a really disappointing end to the story. That's not what happens, and it's incredibly genius. What had happened in the most hand-wavy Batman plot device ever is that Batman figured out that the hourglass of the Time Commander had basically been put, or at least a portion of it put, in every single Amazo that was out there. And we're told that, right? His hourglasses revert objects in time. He put one into each Amazo. That's how they can self-repair. They automatically rewind to the moment before they were attacked. That's genius. It's a genius way to see. This is how you use time in a comic book storyline, right? You don't just hand wave your way to like fix the story and end it because you can't think of anything else. This is such a creative way to do it, and I love it, right? Because when Ted Kord asked the question, like, how in the world does any of this information help us? The response of the Time Commander, right, of John Starr is like, the hourglasses are power linked. There's an override. Hit even one Amazo with this device that I've created, and a chain reaction should rewind all of them to before they stole all of the superpowers, and all that energy gets returned to the superheroes. And that's exactly what happens, but not immediately. Batman shows up with this device and goes to try to like attack one of the Amazos with it, but even he's overwhelmed by the power of the Amazos, because facing off against these guys is like a depowered Justice League facing off against an overpowered Justice League. These guys don't really have much of a chance to go on here. While that's going on, you've got Hal Jordan who's trying to keep this wall intact. It's not working, the wall's falling apart, the enemies are starting to break through, but then like Wally West, Jay Garrick, Max Mercury, and Impulse, these other members of the Flash family come running in order to add their willpower to the power of Hal Jordan, which is great. And this is really kind of a callback in DC, because for the longest time, the Green Lantern comics just weren't selling that well. So DC merged the character, right? You had Green Lantern, Green Arrow, but then for a time, Green Lantern was a backup feature in the Flash comics, and that led to a lot of team-up stories between Hal Jordan and the Flash. It's how DC built their friendship over the years within the DC universe. So as a close friend of the Flash family, where he's helped them so many times, they come to his aid, and it's amazing because this reinforces the power of the Source Wall. And so at that point, you switch back to Amanda Waller, right? And she's like, why did you have to make this so difficult? Imprisonment was the goal. Your escalation forced me to shift my objective to termination. All I ever wanted was to bring justice to an unjust world. All I ever wanted was to end the chaos. Well, that's about to happen. Now, it's a phenomenal ideology, right? I mean, it's like the Jedi and the Sith in Star Wars, right? They both want to achieve the same thing. They just go about it in different ways, right? They both want to bring balance to the Force, peace to the galaxy. Just one of them does it through nefarious means, and the others do it by just sitting around and hoping people choose to be nice. And like that's it, right? But it still amounts to the same goal. And that's what Amanda Waller was striving for here, right? Did she go about it through nefarious means? Sure. But the question has to be asked here, right? When you have escalation from villain to hero to villain to hero, right? Like villains step up their game, so heroes step up their game to meet the villains. Villains step it up more, so heroes step it up more. Where does the destruction end, right? Like, where does it stop? And so as a third party, and arguably the voice of reason, Amanda Waller stepped in, doing the only thing she knew how. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, because as the multiversal wall is shattering, and as all the Amazos are destroying the members of the Justice League, this voice just says, there you are, sorry to take it from you, Bats, but heroes got a hero, and it's Green Arrow Oliver Queen. He grabs this device, attaches it to an arrow, fires it into an Amazo. The exact thing happened the Time Commander said would happen. All the powers of the superheroes revert back to the superheroes themselves, and hell's bells, Superman flexes for all of us to enjoy the power of his muscles. Look at that smile. But it's amazing, right? Like, it's so cool because like all the superheroes are finally back. The Amazos are dealt with instantly, but then you switch over to Amanda Waller, and she is incensed, right? She's like losing her mind. Even the failsafe robot that was previously designed by Batman turned against Batman and then joined Amanda Waller. That thing's powering down, right? And that's where Nightwing says, failsafe's drained too, Amanda. What's wrong? Your dream is over. You're out of contingency plans. And she says, Green Lantern and the Flashes are still losing. That gate is my back door. Move an inch and I'll blow your head off. And that's where like Dreamer comes in, right? Now, Dreamer was a character who was forced to work on Amanda Waller's Suicide Squad. And there was a point when she was forced to turn against the superheroes. Ultimately, it was believed she was killed when like the Fortress of Solitude was invaded and everything went to pieces. But in arguably the most hand-wavy moment in comics, that Amanda Waller's just kind of like, I thought you were dead. Dreamer says, you're right, the blast in the Fortress of Solitude tore me apart, but you can't kill a dream, not if it's remembered. John dreamed of me constantly while he was under Brainiac Queen's control. He couldn't let me go. Without realizing it, he literally pulled me into the dreamscape. That gave me the chance to rebuild myself, healing in his dreams and waiting for my chance at you. Is it the most hand-wavy piece of logic in the history of comics? Yes. Is it equally as amazing? Absolutely. I love this. I love it when sometimes they just throw in hand-wavy comic book logic and it just adds to the story, right? Like I never really have an issue here. But what ends up happening is that while the line is being held by the Flashes and the Lanterns, Barry Allen says, I'm hesitant about doing this. And the question is asked why? And he says, because if I activate this, it will close us off from the multiverse permanently. So for those of you guys who were asking the question in DC All In, why are they cut off from the multiverse? This is the reason why. They had to do it to stop the multiversal army of Amanda Waller from invading. And so that's when you get this really amazing moment, right? Where you kind of have Amanda Waller who's just like, so what? All the superheroes' powers are back. What do you plan on doing with them? The people you protect, you're dead to them. I fooled every last one of them. I used the Queen's AI to show the entire planet what I want them to know, that superheroes are monsters. Thanks to that one play, the world's governments will run you off this earth before they let you so much as save a cat from a tree. And she's like, I won. And that's where Nightwing is just like, you've been hanging out with the bad guys for far too long, Amanda Waller, because that villain rant is exactly what I was counting on. And he presents her to Airwave. And Airwave is a superhero who's a living Wi-Fi signal, as Nightwing basically explains it, but essentially he's a living electricity, right? Like he just broadcasts anything. That whole rant that she just went on, he broadcast it to every single phone, computer, TV screen on the planet Earth. Everyone on Earth just heard Amanda Waller admit to the world that she lied and she is duplicitous. There's no escape from this, man. But at the end of the day, Flash had to pull it off. Flash had to shut down the barrier. Flash has cut off the main DC universe from the rest of the multiverse. And so 2 days after this, what you do is you pick up with Amanda Waller in a prison cell. And those of you guys who hate Amanda Waller, man, you're gonna love this. She is in Belle Reve, right? Now here's the kicker, right? Amanda Waller, as all of you guys know, she's like the J. Edgar Hoover of DC Comics. She's got information on everybody. And she even says it, right? She was like, this whole thing is pointless, right? Given all that I have to bargain with. I'm not above blackmailing my way out of here. Every hidden base, every alias, every secret weakness, there's nothing that I don't know about every superhero on Earth. And Dreamer, who's the one that's kind of taunting her, is like, really? Where's the Batcave? And Amanda Waller can't answer. What's Green Lantern's alter ego? How about Mary Marvel's alter ego? Where do the Birds of Prey meet? Where's Booster Gold from? And that's when you realize that what Dreamer had done is she had gone into the mind of Amanda Waller and didn't so much as wipe her memories out, but just remove her access to those memories. Now, what this means is it gives DC an out, right? To basically shelve Amanda Waller for the here and now, and then bring her back at some point in time when she's figured out a way to re-access those memories and then blackmail her way out of prison and then go back to being the person that she's always been. But here's the real kicker to this. Dreamer taunts her with a thing. Those of you guys who know Amanda Waller know, when she brings you onto the Suicide Squad, she plants a bomb in your brain, right? Dreamer hints at the fact that Waller might have a bomb in her brain. And Dreamer doesn't answer her, right? Like she doesn't tell her, like whether or not she has a bomb in her head. It's one of the coolest things, right? And so following that, you pick up with Superman, Wonder Woman, and Batman, who basically meet up in the original Justice League headquarters. And when I say original, I mean like OG, double OG, like Brave and the Bold, first appearance of the Justice League in DC Comics. Like, Super old school headquarters, right? I love the fact that these little references and callbacks are being done. But we learn a couple things here. Number one, we learn that like a lot of the superheroes that were really injured are recovering, and some of those include Animal Man. Like that matters. Superman's like an animal man, right? Like Animal Man, dude, who cares, man? Yeah, you know what, Superman? Our hearts, man. Like we're shedding those tears for a guy who can turn into a gopher. Like that'll be the day. But then other guys like Red Tornado and so on and so forth. But the other thing we learn is that when everybody's powers were restored, some people swapped powers. So there are superheroes out there like Plastic Man who can actually make himself intangible. He can't stretch the way that he traditionally used to, which I'm actually really excited to see where DC goes with this. But one of the things that Oliver does in bringing them here is he says, like, look, here's the thing. I get that I pissed you guys off by going underground, pretending to work alongside Amanda Waller, having the whole ruse and all that kind of stuff. But understand, man, like we were caught flat-footed, right? Had we been in constant communication like the old days, that never would have happened. And he's not wrong, right? Like when DC got rid of the Justice League of America after Crisis on Infinite Earths, Grant Morrison brought it back in the JLA run in 1998. And one of the things that they did during that run is Martian Manhunter created a psychic link between all the members of the Justice League so they could all communicate without having to wear little devices, right? Walking around looking like middle-aged men with their Bluetooth headsets, right? You know, that kind of thing. But instead of doing that, like they could just use Martian Manhunter as a communication relay. But what Oliver Queen says here is we weren't doing that, right? Like now there's so many loose ends that we have to wrap up because we honestly just got lazy, but we need to be bigger than we were before. We need to be more coordinated, more proactive. And that's where Batman stops him and it's just like, we want to show you something. And so this directly goes into the DC All-In comic, which is kind of cool because for those of you guys who watched Justice League Unlimited, and yes, I started watching it, it's okay. Like this is how it all kind of kicks off, right? But in any event, we're going to bring this video to an end. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments section. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. If you did, drop a like and I will catch you all later. Peace.